How's it going, everybody? Dr. Stringer back to talk to you this week on trial dynamics. Pretty short lecture today, not a whole lot going on. And to some extent, we've covered a little bit of some of these things as we've talked about the courtroom work group and things like that throughout the class. So not a whole lot of new information this week. Pretty laid back module for you all. But hopefully you won't forget to do your readings and still participate in your discussion board. So with that, we're on to Module 11. Only a few more modules left, and then it's your exam. You should be starting to think about what you're going to do for your research paper, as that is due pretty shortly. If you haven't started to think about your ideas for that just yet, that's probably something that you want to get to start working on as soon as you can. This week might be a good week to start thinking about that, since we don't have a whole lot of material and there's not a lot of readings. I think you guys had like 20 pages this week to read, so that's not too bad, right? At least that's what I say. You guys are like, 20 pages, that might be a lot. I don't know. But anyway, so moving on, we're going to talk about trial dynamics. The courtroom work group, like I said, we've probably covered this and talked about it a little bit throughout the class as we've talked about plea bargaining and different things. But just remember, to recap, the courtroom work group is the kind of key players that are in the courtroom every day. And this includes the judge, the prosecutors, and the defense attorneys. These are the people that are there. There'll be clerks there and stuff like that, but they're not the ones that are necessarily handling the big decision-making processes. They're more handling the paperwork, and then you have bailiffs and stuff like that, but they're not part of the courtroom work group either. And as I've alluded to several times throughout the class, the case processing in which things are processed through the courts are really more of a kind of consensus model rather than this conflict model as you see in the actual trial process. And then another thing that tends to have an impact on things is kind of the idea of the local legal culture. You'll get kind of these ideas that in some areas, things might be perceived as more significant crimes than in others, or it even vary across time. I know, one example might be something like drunk driving. If you went back to the 60s and 70s, the local legal culture, the culture pretty much in the United States might be that, DUIs are not something that we need to worry about, and, these are minor traffic offenses and things like that. And obviously this is not the case today, right? But then another example of differences across local legal culture might be, in some areas of the country, people are starting to look differently towards legalization of marijuana or marijuana charges. Some prosecutors aren't prosecuting them anymore, and then in other areas they're still prosecuting them fully. So that varies a little bit across place. And there can also be things with sentencing. I think your book talks about kind of the going rate for certain punishments for certain offenses. So if you get a driving on suspended license, then maybe the going rate is 30 days in jail. So it would be expected that everybody would kind of understand that, and that would be the behavior that everybody would kind of go into as they go into kind of working on trials and things like that. There's the 5 elements of the legal culture, the degree to which the members thought of themselves as a community. If they don't really think about themselves as a community, it's probably not going to have a whole lot of impact on things. The shared beliefs regarding the interpersonal relations, the shared attitudes about case processing routines, plea bargains, the going rates, like I said, and a shared special language and commonly understood nonverbal communication that's going on, as well as kind of this sense of tradition, right? Well, this is the way we've always done it, this is the way we should continue to do so. So these are the things that can matter. If you look at the circumvention of policy changes, well, some members of the work group might find ways to circumvent certain policy changes. So if members of the courtroom work group think that the policy interferes with the job, they might resist it. So, this could influence a number of different things. displacement of discretion. Here, sometimes maybe the discretion, the power might shift from one member to another member. So examples of plea bargaining and sentencing would be a good example of that as well. But another important thing to think about is the idea of the media. The media can have a bit of an influence on things that go on, especially in the trials, because we have this right that comes from our Sixth Amendment, that we have a right to a speedy and a public trial. So the idea that the trial is public is supposed to kind of protect the defendant's rights. It used to be, back in England, there would be trials, if you can even call it a trial, where the Crown would, hear your case and then decide that you were guilty or innocent, most of the time guilty, and it would be private. People would not be able to see exactly how the trial was conducted and whether they thought it was fair and legitimate and things like that. And so the public trial is kind of an important part when it comes to our rights in the United States, and that was a key part that our founders thought was important. Making sure that the prosecutor doesn't abuse his or her power, or the judge, is part of having the media there, having the cameras there. In some states you're allowed to have cameras in the courtroom, others you're not. And the federal system and Supreme Court, of course, you don't get to have cameras. But as you guys probably know, in California, maybe you don't know, in California, you are allowed to have cameras. And if you go on YouTube, you can actually, those of you that watch the Netflix show on O.J. Simpson, you can actually go, and it used to be, it might not still be there, I don't know, but you can go and watch all the video recordings from the O.J. Simpson trial. And for those of you that are interested in this kind of stuff, it's not the most interesting, all of the whole parts of it, but you can go and you can watch Johnny Cochran's closing argument about the judge doesn't quit, or if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit, and all of that kind of stuff. So I watched those things back when I was an undergrad, and I thought that they were pretty interesting. So if they're still there, I would encourage you all to check it out and see. It is a very long trial. Trials tend to be pretty long in California. So there is many hours of video if it is still on YouTube. So it's something to think about. But the idea of having the media there, it can turn into kind of what some people call kind of a media circus. And so, we've talked about Nifong and, kind of his attempts at trying the case in the media, and kind of this tends to taint the jury pool a little bit, which is not really the best thing. It's certainly not ethical. But there's some things that judges can do to kind of mitigate the trial publicity and try to wait for it to die down and things like that. And that might be granting it continuance until the publicity about the case has died down a little bit. They could grant a motion for a change of venue. So they could change the venue from Kennesaw, Georgia to Columbus, Georgia, or to somewhere else where maybe they haven't heard about this case. Now, if it's a really big case like O.J. Simpson, chances are it's not going to matter where you send it to. People will have heard about it. So the other thing you can do is conduct the voir dire, which is where you're asking questions of the jurors. You can do that based upon, asking if they're familiar with the case. You can ask them if they've heard about the case in the media, things like that. You can actually sequester jurors during the trial. You've probably heard about that before, where the jurors are taken to a hotel room and they're not allowed to really interact very much with the external world, and they're not supposed to watch the news and things like that. And you can actually issue gag orders too, which actually prevents people from talking about the case and things like that. So these are just other ways of kind of getting at these kind of issues that can come up with kind of the media circus. So just a couple of short things, that I wanted to talk about with you all this week about this. There's not a whole lot of new material, so with that, please don't forget to do your discussion board, and please take your quiz too, which you all should do very well on, since I think this is a pretty easy module. And with that, I will talk to you all next week, and I hope everybody has a good week. And I will see you then. Bye.